Chapter 1 Peter. I saw the beautiful stranger steal the fish I had worked so hard to catch this morning, but I didn't say anything. I recognized desperation when I saw it. Hunger was obvious to those who had been hungry. She had stared at the fish for a long time before making her move, likely contemplating how to get away with it. Her hands twitched toward it so slightly that I wasn't even sure if she knew she was doing it. I turned away from her to help another customer, and when I turned back to see if she needed help too, I saw her drop the fish into her clunky, oversized brown purse and disappear back into the bustle of the noon crowd at the farmer's market. The concern that washed over me was startling. She looked close to my age, but it was hard to tell if she was still in high school or out on her own in the world. I wanted to ask her why she took it, how long it had been since she had her last meal, and if she had a plan to take care of herself. I didn't say any of those things, of course. The idea was preposterous. I had to keep my distance. If I didn't get close to people, the odds of getting upset went down dramatically. If I didn't get upset, I wouldn't turn into the wolf. If I didn't turn into the wolf, I wouldn't hurt anybody again. My guilt was strong enough as it was. I didn't need anything else to add to my list of regrets and keep me up at night. Staying away from her was the best thing I could do, so I didn't demand that she pay for the fish. And I didn't offer any personal advice on dealing with hunger. I watched as she moved through the crowd, feigning stealth. She looked as guilty as she was. Depending on how hungry she was, especially if she was to the point of starving, the market would be a torturous place for her. The scent of food was inescapable. Pungent tomato vines seemed to be the loudest of the smells, but you could also pick out the scent of fresh herbs, ripening berries, and the dirt clinging to the root vegetables. If she was experiencing true hunger, as I expected, she wouldn't have the money to pay for anything here. It would taunt her, just out of her reach, unless she was brave enough to steal it. I knew what that was like. I, too, had resorted to stealing years ago, but I did everything I could to avoid it. I hoped she had done the same. I could forgive an act of desperation, but not selfishness. After a few moments, I lost her in the sea of movement and excitement. The buzz of mindless chatter made it hard for me to focus. I longed for the isolation of the woods and the sounds of nature. Humans were loud and obnoxious. They used 15 words when they only needed 2. "Are you planning on paying for that, Missy?" a man barked from further down the market. I recognized his voice. He was one of the fruit and vegetable vendors. I didn't have to look to know that it was her he was calling out. Was this the first time the girl had ever stolen something? Should I have called her out on it before she got caught by someone less empathetic? Should I have taught her how to be better at it? An older couple was picking out a fish at my booth, arguing whether they needed to bake or fry it. The woman swore baking it was better for their health. She had seen it on the internet. The man didn't care. He was 84 years old, and he wasn't going to spend his last days eating subpar cooked fish because of what some idiot said on the computer. "Young people have no respect today," the vendor continued, berating the girl. The crowd quieted to murmurs and whispers. It would have been nice if the vendor didn't insist on continuing his tirade and breaking the peaceful quiet. "You think you can do whatever you want without consequences? Well, guess what, little lady? There will be consequences this time. I'm through with your generation's entitlement and disrespect." I turned my head toward them. The girl still hadn't spoken. She hung her head in shame, her shoulders curling in as if she were trying to disappear. Her arms were crossed, but it wasn't in defiance. No, she was trying to comfort herself. The crowd had started to back away from her as if being a thief was contagious. I told myself not to get involved. I needed to stay out of it. It wasn't a big deal. She could handle it on her own. It didn't concern me. My hands picked a fish up and wrapped it for the couple. I took the money and nodded to them to show my appreciation. They smiled and continued bickering in low voices now that the market was quiet. As if they had a mind of their own, my hands dove back into the ice to get a second fish. I was surprised to feel the cold on my fingers as I wrapped it up and started walking toward the scene. I couldn't stop. I couldn't stay out of it. My brain knew better, but my feet kept moving toward them, weaving through the frozen onlookers. I could hear the tablecloths flapping in the wind, a sound usually covered up by the hum of socialization and the clatter of metal scales. "I'm going to call the police and see what we can do about you," the man muttered as he fumbled with his phone while trying to hold on to the tomato in question. A tomato. He was throwing a childlike fit over a tomato. He had at least 50 more. I grunted to get his attention. His eyes snapped up to mine, the anger melting into fear and surprise as he saw who I was. We had sold in this market together for over a year and had never spoken before. I wasn't about to break the silence. I held out the fish for him to take as payment for the tomato. My fish was worth far more, and he knew it. He took a deep breath and set the phone down. It looked like it pained him to do so, but he sat the tomato down in front of the girl and took the fish from me. I nodded to him to signal that the matter was closed and turned my head back to my booth. The shoppers and vendors rushed to look like they were doing something else instead of watching me. The girl was forgotten as the market gave a collective sigh of relief that I wasn't going to cause a scene. I shook my head to myself as I took my spot behind my coolers of ice and fish. These people had never seen me cause a scene before, but they still knew to fear me. Could they sense the wolf that stalked behind my skin, waiting to come out and punish the vendor for embarrassing a starving girl? Or were they only afraid of me because they had no idea what to expect due to my silence? "Thank you," someone whispered from behind me. I jumped and whirled around to see the beautiful thief standing not 1 foot behind me. She was far too close for comfort. No one besides myself had been behind my booth before. The girl was obviously new to the market if she was comfortable enough with me to be so close. Most people knew I didn't care for small talk and left me alone. Plus, if I had seen her here before, I was sure I would have remembered. I nodded, trying to disguise my surprise at seeing her. I backed slightly closer to the table, feeling trapped when I bumped into it. "Why did you do that?" she asked. Tears filled her eyes, and her face was still as red as the tomato in her hand. I didn't realize someone with such dark skin could blush like that. Her embarrassment unsettled me. Was I supposed to comfort her? What were the societal norms for something like this? "You looked hungry," I said. It came out more gruffly than I intended. I was rusty when it came to social interactions, and it was incredibly obvious. She hung her head in shame and started to reach into her large purse. I reached out and grabbed her wrist before she could pull out the fish she had stolen from me. Her eyes snapped up to mine. I pulled my hand back as if she had burned me. "It's okay," I assured her. "Go eat." Her eyebrows furrowed in confusion, but the eyes themselves took on a new emotion I couldn't name. No one had ever looked at me like that before, at least that I could remember. They were as deep and brown as the earth, and I wanted to know what secrets were buried within them. The girl was so breathtaking and well-dressed. Her dark hair was pretty and clean. So why was she hungry? I couldn't figure her out. She smiled a small, sweet smile of gratitude and left my booth. I reached out after her with my tingling hand. Had she really burned it? Or was this simply what it felt like to touch someone else? How long had it been since I touched another person? Years? I stroked my beard in confusion as I watched her disappear. Who was this girl that she had so much influence over my thoughts and actions? "You didn't do her any favors," the vendor said, bringing my attention back to the present. His anger was still bottled up inside with nowhere to go now that I had paid for her tomato. I knew what that felt like, but I still didn't appreciate being spoken to like that. Or at all. "That girl will keep stealing since you let her get away with it. Mark my words," he continued, pointing his thick finger in my direction. "One day she'll steal from you. I bet you won't be so understanding then." The shoppers started glancing in our direction again. I began to pack up my cart. No one would be brave enough to approach me after the drama that had unfolded today anyway. Few were in the first place. "Do you know why people steal? It's because they are selfish, entitled brats who think everything belongs to them. They don't realize that we slave away to bring these fresh goods to the market." I didn't look at or speak to him as I put away the last of my things. My cart was much fuller than I was used to at the end of a workday. I would have to eat a lot of fish to make sure it didn't go to waste. "Hey, I'm talking to you," he said, his voice getting louder and filled with that misplaced anger. I took a deep breath, in through my nose, out through my mouth. I would not take on his anger. I would not turn into the wolf. I was in control. "You are right, sir," I stated in a calm voice. His ears and eyebrows moved back in surprise. Whether he was surprised that I spoke or that I agreed with him, I couldn't say. "But sometimes people steal because they are hungry," I finished. His anger returned. "Even if you're hungry, you should think about what other people have to go through to sell the items you're stealing." I nodded, keeping my calm. "You should. But it's hard to think about other people when all you're focused on is survival." I left without gauging how my response affected him. Did he huff off, stuck in his anger and unable to see anyone else's point of view? Or did he gasp as he realized that a drowning man will drown someone else in an attempt to save himself? As I made my way into the woods, all thoughts of the vendor and the thief faded away as I realized that my cart was 2 fish lighter than my wallet was heavier, and there were 4 fish still in the cooler that remained unsold. My charity was going to put me behind, and I might not make enough to buy food for the winter. And if I was cold and starving, I would be so upset that the wolf was sure to come out and take over for as long as he pleased. And when he was through with me, I would wake up in the woods, alone and naked, and no one would even miss me for the months or years I was gone.